like to share my screen with you and talk just a moment about camera clubs in general for those of you who don't already belong to one. Welcome to your iPhone as a creative tool with Rad Drew. N4C is a consortium of camera clubs. And we just wanted to tell you a good reason to join a camera club if you don't already belong to one. There's a lot of good conversation at meetings and conferences and field trips with other people who share your same interests. A lot of fun. There can be a lot of great relationships that come out of that. Gaining new skills from expert speakers, members, club events, and publications. N4C has a newsletter and a website that are very informative. Get helpful expert feedback on your photos in monthly competitions. We have some very knowledgeable and expert judges. Get inspired by what other photographers are doing. And I know this one's a big one for me. I really pay attention to what other people are doing, and I learn a lot. And it gets me motivated to do some other things. So if you don't already belong to one, you can go to the N4C website right here, n4c.org/clubs. And you can find one near you in the Bay Area. And if you don't live in the Bay Area, I'm sure if you put in camera clubs, Google camera clubs in your area, you're likely to find something. Okay. Today we have Rad Drew, who is going to talk to us about using your iPhone as a creative tool. So, Rad?
All right, so you should be able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. I know that, I don't know, are any of you from the Villages Camera Club? Just by show of hands. I recently had the opportunity to present to that group. It's been January, I believe. I see a couple people. Yeah, okay, well, good. Well, hopefully this won't be an entire rerun of what we talked about before. We may have some overlap in topics and hopefully some new images, but I really appreciate you having me out here. I've been doing iPhone photography since 2009 when I got my first iPhone, which was an iPhone 4. Seems like eons ago now. I've been a photographer most of my life. I started as a kid and then got my photojournalism degree from Indiana University, and I worked as a journalist for a while as a photojournalist. So I always had a camera with me, and back in that was film days. But then after a while, I kind of jumped ship, and I went back and got my master's degree, and I went and worked in corporate America for a while. I worked with Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis for almost 30 years. But in 2009, I started this business and established my love affair with photography. I always had a camera with me during those years, but I wasn't doing it professionally. But when the phone came out, it really opened up a whole new world of just ways to see, ways to work with the digital darkroom in the palm of my hand, and I loved it. And I just never really looked back. I started this company. I've been doing photography education now for 12 years, and during that time, I've gotten to lead groups to destinations around the world, throughout Europe, Tuscany, Calabria, southern Italy, south of France, throughout the United States. I haven't been to San Francisco area with the group yet, or to do a workshop. So you guys, let's work on having me come out and and photograph with you in that area. But it's been just a great opportunity to meet a lot of people and to share what I know about photography. And I also shoot with Fuji cameras. I do infrared photography both on my Fuji and my iPhone these days. And I'm wondering if we can mute some of I'm hearing a lot of background noise. I don't know if you guys are, but if you can mute yourself, it would probably help with the audio. But as I was saying, I shoot with Fuji cameras, Lumix, Nikon, and I enjoy infrared photography, and then I shoot with a variety of mobile cameras, mostly iPhone cameras. But it's gotten to the point where the line between the big cameras and the iPhone cameras is really getting a little blurry. It used to be that the iPhone camera just didn't really have the chops to hold up against the bigger cameras and everything. But today, we're able to shoot RAW with our phones and process RAW. We have apps like Lightroom that work on our phone. the new iPhone 12 shoots its own Apple proprietary ProRAW. So the phone has really gotten really good. As I go on workshops with people, I hear big camera photographers talking about how they're now including the iPhone in their in their toolkit. So anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. It's going to be kind of fast paced, but it is recorded, so you can go. I shoot with Fuji cameras, Lumix, Nikon, and I enjoy infrared photography. And then I shoot with a variety of mobile cameras, mostly iPhone cameras. But it's gotten to the point where the line between the big cameras and the iPhone cameras is really getting a little blurry. It used to be that the iPhone camera just didn't really have the chops to hold up against the bigger cameras and everything. But today, we're able to shoot RAW with our phones and process RAW. We have apps like Lightroom that work on our phone. The new iPhone 12 shoots its own Apple proprietary ProRAW. So the phone has really gotten really good. As I go on workshops with people, I hear big camera photographers talking about how they're now including the iPhone in their in their toolkit. So anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. It's going to be kind of fast paced, but it is recorded, so you can go back and look at things. And if you have questions, I do this full time, and I enjoy exchanges with people throughout on all these different topics. So contact me if you have questions. So tonight, what I want to do is we're going to cover a lot of territory. It's a little eclectic in that way. I mean, we're going to focus on iPhone things, but I want to take a minute to talk about composition. And I know many of you are seasoned photographers, so this is going to be a review for sure. But it's so important in terms of the things that make our images dynamic. I want to talk a little bit about the camera settings on the phone, because those can be really important to getting the quality in our images. And each of us may have different phones. I'm going to be working with the 13 Pro Max, but I've got some slides that I'm going to share with you that have the settings for other cameras from the, I don't know, I think I go back as far as the 10. So you can take a look at how your settings may differ, because each new phone has come out with new bells and whistles and new features and things. So we'll cover that at first. And then I want to dive into the native phone iPhone camera. That's the phone, the camera that comes with the phone. Or today it's cameras now, because our phones have as many as 3 cameras built in. And I want to just show you how I use live mode, portrait mode, burst mode, and panos for creating images. And then I want to just show you a little bit about processing RAW with Apple's editor. This is by no means a workshop on shooting RAW with your phone, but I want to show you how you can do it, and how wonderful it is, and how easy. Then I'm going to take you into SnapSeed, SnapSeed is probably one of the most widely used and versatile mobile apps. It works on iPhone and Android. And it's kind of to the iPhone world what Photoshop is to the desktop world. I mean, it's a processor in the palm of your hand that is very sophisticated and allows you not only to edit your images, but also to stylize them. So we'll be looking at that. And then I have 2 apps that I want to show you that they've been around for a while, and they're tools that I use for creating abstract images. And I find I have so much fun with them, and I wanted to show you how I use those. And then where am I here? And then I wanted to take a look at Distressed FX Plus, which is an iPhone app for processing and stylizing images. And then also take a look at another app called Touch Retouch, which is a tool for removing unwanted elements from your image. I think it's the best tool out there for that kind of thing. And before I get started, I just want to say a word about RAW. So I know many of you out there are already big camera photographers, and you're photographing, I'm sure you're shooting in RAW. And now that we have that capability with the iPhone, I think it's a really great opportunity for photographers today to get the best quality from our phones. So we have the ability now to shoot ProRAW, which is Apple's proprietary RAW format with the 12 and the 13. But if you have an earlier phone, you can use Lightroom to get great RAW photos. You can also use apps like Camera Plus 2 to create RAW. So you don't need the latest phone to be able to shoot RAW. And the reasons that we would do that are kind of the same reasons that we do it with our big cameras. Those RAW files have more data in them, and we have more creative control over how we edit those. So it leads to a higher quality image. And if you're printing from a RAW file from the beginning, really gives you an advantage in terms of the quality of your output. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go to the extra trouble of having to process my RAW file, because a RAW file does need to be processed. But the thing is, we all process our JPEG files anyway from our iPhone, usually a little bit. It doesn't take hardly any more at all to process a RAW file, but the quality difference is amazing. So that's my little spiel about RAW. If you aren't doing it yet, give it a shot and see if you like it. And I'll try and introduce you to some of it tonight. If you want, this is not a RAW webinar. If you want to learn more about that, I have a 90-minute webinar that tells more about how to create RAW on your phone and how to process it with a variety of tools. So you'll have a link to that in this slideshow. So let's start in and take a look at composition. And again, I don't want it to make this an aside to everything, but it's just so fundamental to what we're doing, whether you're shooting with a phone or a big camera. And I just don't want to give it short shrift. So, because it really is key to how dynamic our images can be. And, there are tons and tons and tons of guidelines around composition. If you Google it, you'll find a litany of guidelines out there. And I firmly believe that those are meant to be broken. They're there for a reason. And as long as we understand what they are, I think breaking them is perfectly, fine. So let's just talk a little bit. Here are just a few of those guidelines that I like to talk about tonight. We all know the rule of thirds. It's probably the one that is probably most known, but it's fundamentally a very sound guideline for us. And it basically is looking at these four intersections as the prime real estate in our scene. And so trying to have elements in the photo land in those areas. So in this example, this is a tree in the Palouse out in eastern Washington. We have these cattails leading up to the tree, so we're leading lines pulling us in. The tree isn't right at the intersection of those lines, but it's very close. But then the other thing we have going on here is we have the horizon. I chose to put the horizon at this point and let the clouds take up the other part of the image and be a significant part of the show in this image. So I like to have that rule of thirds grid on in my native camera when I'm shooting, and it guides me to make those kinds of decisions. This is an image, another a horizontal image, same thing. This was taken in Tuscany, and this the dog that lived at the farm we were staying at followed us out on our morning walk in the fog, and using that rule of thirds guideline, I placed her at this juncture right here. But then we have several other things going on. We've got these leading lines bringing us up to this row of cypress trees, and your eye almost circles here in the image and holds the viewer. So again, a simple concept, but one that, if we can keep it in mind as we're framing our images. Here's another concept, which is leading lines. And a lot of times they'll take us into a vanishing point like they do here, and often just lead us to the subject of the image. And this was taken out on Cape Cod, and I chose black and white because of the graphic nature of this image, and it just pulls us into this nearly silhouetted figure here on the walkway. Another concept is using natural frames in the environment to frame your image. This was taken in France, and I was in a castle adjacent to this church, and it was a perfect frame to from the portal in the castle to frame the subject that's out through the hole that was made by the window there. Here's another example from my hometown, framing the state Capitol building in Indianapolis with this structure in front of it. And they're out there. Those kinds of things are there if we just plan about it, think about it, and make ourselves aware of those things going on. The other thing is S curves. I don't know if many of you know Tony Sweet. I think he's one of the hardest working photographers out there today, and he's been a mentor of mine for years. And one of the first things I learned from him was always shoot an S curve. There's hardly anything more engaging than an S curve that pulls you into an image. And sometimes they're as obvious as this road in the country in southern Indiana last fall. But sometimes they're more cryptic, and we have to look a little harder for them. As case in point is this photograph in the Razin Desert on the Arabian Peninsula, where I traveled a few years ago. And if you look here, there is this S curve is kind of pulling us in along this dune here, and then it backs to the left, and then it pulls us out through the frame here. And it's just a way of pulling the viewer into your image and holding them there. These are things this is the slides that I was telling you about. I'm going to have these here for you to look at. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them here, but I go back through the iPhone X, the XS Max, the 11 Pro, the 12 Pro, and the 13 Pro phones. So these are my recommendations for settings. Some of them are preferences, and of course you may opt to do something different. And I encourage you to explore, the different settings. And we'll look at my phone here in a minute and I'll talk a little bit about why I've chosen some of these things. But since we all have different phones, it's very challenging to recommend one set of settings for everybody. So let's go ahead. I'm going to close things up here. Let's see. Well, I'm going to take you through these aspects of the native phone. We'll look at the iOS editor. I think I've said most of this before. SnapSeed, I'm going to show you a basic workflow. Again, if you're interested in more comprehensive course on SnapSeed, I have a 90-minute video on that goes very deep into all the different aspects of it. And then we'll look at Average Cam Pro, Touch Retouch, and the Distressed FX demo. I do have some videos on YouTube that are out there that are free, that are just little 15, 20-minute things that offer kind of how to do certain things with some of these apps. So do check that out. And let's see, where am I here?
Brad?
Yeah.
I do have several questions in the chat. I don't know if this is a good time, or if you want to, maybe you can let us know if these things that are going to be addressed throughout the program.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Go ahead and.
Okay. Mike, it says, can you talk a little bit about the noise and pixelation of images that are blown up or zoomed in on, particularly in low light situations?
Well, I am going to talk a little bit about some things that you can do to maximize the potential of getting a good photo and minimizing that pixelization. There are a lot of little mistakes that are really easy to make with the iPhone when it comes to zooming and things like that. Night photography, depending on which phone you have, the later models have a night mode, which is remarkable in terms of how it works and how it takes photographs. And it uses computational photography to combine a group of images that are taken over a period of time, and it gives you a night image that has far less noise than images taken without night mode. So we can talk a little bit about that. I think it'll become evident, or some of the things will be evident when we look at the some of the zooming techniques and things. Okay. The other thing, as far as I see a question there about the size, I'm sitting in a room here looking at images that I've printed at, well, many of them are 16 by 20, as far back as with the iPhone 4. And as long as you do certain things to avoid down-resing the image through processing or things like that, you can maintain a fairly, a good size file with good resolution that you can print large. Today, with the phones that we have today, I'm printing, well, I'm looking at an image here that's 60 inches wide. And when we shoot RAW, the regular phones produce a 12 megapixel image with really good resolution there that we can print fairly large. But when we shoot RAW, we can increase that considerably because of that extra resolution that comes with that. Now, there are also tools today that are desktop software tools that allow us to take an iPhone image, or really any image that's been cropped from a big camera image or whatever, and enlarge them. The one that I use is Gigapixel AI from Topaz Labs, and it is a truly remarkable piece of software that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to enlarge our images. And I use that for printing my iPhone images quite large.
Okay. Rad?
Yeah.
Several people have said, could we please save questions till the end because they wanted to hear your lecture. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine with me. We've got a lot of content to cover, so I'll stick to that unless there's something dire that needs to be answered right away. And we'll take a minute, I guess, at the end, and we can talk about part 2 of this in the critique section. So,
okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. And I'm going to stop sharing. And now I'm going to share my iPhone. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my iPhone on the screen now. And what I want to do is I want to start out by going to just looking at the settings for the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And the settings that you're going to set on your phone, if it's different than mine, are going to be in the same place. And you can use the slides in that deck that I just went through to help you determine what you want to do for your own. So let's go ahead. I'm going to open up my settings here, and it's your camera settings that I'm referring to right here. And I'm going to go out, and I mean, this is what the settings panel looks like. I'm going to scroll way down in the list until I come to camera. It's all the way down here. And when I tap on that, you're going to see something that looks like this. It may be different if you have an earlier phone, but it's going to be very similar. The first thing that everyone should see is formats. And if I tap on formats, it takes me out to this panel, and they're asking us to make a decision about what kind of what format we want to capture most of our photos in when we use the native camera. I prefer the high efficiency format. It's a more contemporary format. It's more efficient, takes up less space, and has more data. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with choosing most compatible, and it will produce a JPEG file. And this is what we're doing when we choose with the native camera. If you have a 12 or a 13 and you have the option of shooting the ProRAW, it will shoot ProRAW unless you turn RAW off, and then it will default to whatever you've chosen here. The other thing that you'll want to do, I think, if you have the 12 or the 13, you'll want to turn on ProRAW. This puts a switch on the interface of your native camera so that you can take RAW photos, and you can turn it off if you don't want to take a RAW photo. But if you don't turn it on here, the switch will not appear on your camera interface, and you won't be able to take RAW photographs. I don't shoot much video. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but my friends who are videographers tell me that we do want to have this turned on, and it does a remarkable job of helping us get, it's kind of like an HDR approach to video, which gives us a balanced exposure. So now I'm going to go and tap the camera icon here and go back one level. And the rest of these things, again, you can set these at your leisure later. I'm going to move us down here to preserve settings. When I tap on that, you'll notice I have almost all of these turned on. What this is going to do is it's going to preserve the last settings that you had for that particular tool or adjustment, so rather than automatically resetting to the photo. So to me, it's just a time saver, and I like to do that. The only one that I don't turn on is live photo. And I have a love-hate relationship with this tool. I love what it can do for us. And I'm disappointed sometimes that I have accidentally taken a live photo when I didn't intend to. Maybe you've done that too. You got to look at your photos and they're moving. Well, when it's used properly, this is an amazingly powerful tool, but I don't turn it on here. It still allows me to turn it on at the camera interface. The rest of these I have set to use my volume up button to take a burst of photos. And we were talking about that rule of third composition grid. If you want to see that in your camera interface, you have to turn it on in the settings here. I turn off mirror front camera. This is the camera that would be used to take a selfie. I don't use it much. I just turn that off. You can play with that. It's going to mirror the image. So kind of like when you hold up a piece of paper with writing on it in a mirror, it's going to be backwards. And if you flip, you can flip this so that it doesn't appear that way when you take a photograph. View outside the frame, I personally don't like, and I turn it off. It's an odd, peculiar thing where you can actually take a photograph that's outside the normal frame of the image, and it lasts for 30 days. And if you don't use it, it reverts to it's a bunch of hocus pocus that I don't like. I don't see the point in it, so I turn it off. The later phones have something called photographic styles. I don't turn those on, but what they allow you to choose different tones and styles, so all your images look that way. If you want that, you can turn it on. I want to work with each individual image and do the kinds of processing to it that I want, and not have the system do it for me. I do turn on prioritize faster shooting. So if I'm shooting rapidly, it will still give me good image quality when I'm shooting quick. And then also lens correction, especially now that we have the ultra wide 13 millimeter lens on the later phones. Lens correction can help with some of the distortion there. Macro control is something that's new on the 13. I encourage you to experiment with it. I find a lot of, I feel like it's faulty. It puts a switch, when you turn this on, it puts a macro switch on the interface of the camera, but I find it's lacking in its ability to get good results. So I encourage you to try that. I leave it off. I rarely turn it on, but you may be something you want to try for yourself. All right, so I'm going to back out of there. Those are the primary settings that I wanted to share. And if your camera's different, rely on those slides that I shared with you in the deck. And I'll make sure that those get to Vicky or someone who can send those out to you. So what I want to do now is go to the native camera. And what I'm going to do, I have a little studio over here. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm looking at my studio next to my computer here. And I'm going to open up the native camera. And the native camera icon, it's this one right here. Now you have other apps that you can use, other camera apps, but the native camera is the one that comes with the camera. And it is remarkable these days, and I use it quite frequently. So what we're looking at right now is this little desktop setup that I have here. And just as I go around the interface for this camera, you'll notice across the top, there's a flash icon up here. I have it turned off. The flash on the iPhone is very difficult to control, or basically can't be controlled. It's either on or it's off. So I don't use it for anything serious. The next thing that you see there, it says 0.7. That's an exposure slider that allows you to adjust the exposure. And we'll look at that a little more closely in a minute. In the center of the phone, you see a little caret, little arrow in the center right here. If you tap on that, it's a toggle between what you see down below where it says video, photo, and portrait. This is where you go to choose the type of photo you want to make. If you tap on that little caret at the top, it opens up a panel here of different settings that you can access on your phone. And if you have an earlier phone, it's unclear to me whether this is something that is part of the later phones or if it's part of the software that we're all running with the operating system. So if you don't see this, it may be because you have an earlier phone. But what you have down here, you see the flash icon again. It's the same flash icon up above, but when I tap on the flash icon down at the bottom, I can actually tell it to stay on all the time stay off all the time or go on to auto so that it would flash when it determined a need to flash. So I can set it to be off. The same is true here. The next button you see is live mode. And I love live mode, but I don't want to take live mode photos unless I intend to. If I tap on that right icon right there, I can set live to off. And that way it's off unless I turn it on. And so I prefer that. These are settings that you can set, and you can look at this. I don't use this. It lets you, it's kind of that, lets you choose these different warmths and so on, and have those applied to your images. And I don't use it. I want to do my own stylization. The next thing you see there is the 4:3. That's your aspect ratio, and that's the default aspect ratio for the iPhone. If you tap on that, you can choose a square or a landscape 16:9 or orientation, but I typically leave it on 4:3, and I can always crop to those other aspect ratios if I choose. But that's an option that you have. That next button you see there is it's a little circle with a plus and a minus in it, that yellow button. When I tap on that, what it's giving me down here is an exposure slider. If I bring it all the way down, I can take it down to -2. So notice how the scene got very dark, or I can take it all the way up to +2 and it's gotten very bright. So this is just a great way of dialing in your exposure value. It's the same thing you get if you tap on the phone and you get your focal point and your exposure point and you drag your finger up and down. I can brighten the scene by dragging up. I can darken it by going down. It's the same adjustment. I just find this dial to be a lot easier to access. It's also up here in the top row next to the flash icon. If I tap up there, that is where I can turn it on from up there as well. So you've got several ways of accessing this exposure slider. The next thing you see is the RAW icon. Now, if you don't see a RAW button here, it's because either you have a phone prior to the 12 Pro, or you have a 12 or 13, but you haven't turned on ProRAW in your settings. So if you have a later phone and you don't see that, you'll want to go turn that on. The RAW button is on there. Right now, it's going to take a RAW photo, but I can always tap on it and turn it off. I don't have to always take a RAW photo. The RAW photos are going to be 2 to 3 times as large as the file size. Actual size of the RAW file is 2 to 3 times as large as a JPEG or HEIF file. So it does take up more storage space. So if that's an issue, you want to be thoughtful about that. But the quality that you'll get with that RAW file is really tremendous. The next thing you see up there is the live icon. It's got a line through it right now. If I tap on it, it flashes yellow that it's live for just a second. I wish they left it up, but they don't. And then if I want to turn it off, I would just turn it off. Now, if you're shooting RAW, like it's right now, RAW is going to be activated. If I go to shoot a live photo, it turns RAW off. So you cannot get a live photo in RAW format. Hopefully they'll change that at some time, but at this point, that's not possible. So I'm going to turn that off for now. And then down below, you see 0.5, 1x, and 3x. And those are the cameras that are part of the 13 Pro Max. Now, if you have an earlier phone, I think most phones today have 2 or 3 lenses at least, depending on how far back you go. But you may notice mine says 1x and 3. If you have an earlier phone, yours may say 2 or 2.5, because the telephoto lens on the 13 is longer. It's a 77 millimeter, and so it's just a larger number. But you can just tapping. There's the ultra wide 13 millimeter. Tap on 1, and that's the 26 millimeter. And if I tap on 3, that is the 77 millimeter telephoto lens. The earlier phones, I think, are 64. I don't remember. It doesn't matter, but it gives you a long reach by tapping on that. One of the things, so this speaks to that question that was asked earlier about pixelation and quality of the image. One of the things that people do, and I think it's just a matter of not knowing, um, there are ways you can zoom that will destruct your image. So for example, it's very easy to take your two fingers and do that two-finger spread. So if I want to zoom in on a part of my image, I can take two fingers and zoom way in. Well, when I do that, I'm switching from optical zoom, which is looking through the actual camera lens in the camera, to digital zoom. And digital zoom is inferior. It's kind of like cropping an image and then blowing it up real big. And what happens? It gets all pixelated and it looks crummy. Well, that's what's happening when you take two fingers and zoom. The other thing that you can do with the iPhone, you can do a long press on any of those buttons and you've got a dial. With the iPhone, you can zoom in to up to 15x. I can guarantee you might get that photograph of something in that far away, but it's going to be a really crummy photograph. So just keep in mind that those things that are really easy to do can degrade your image. So the things that you want to do here, you want to avoid the finger pinch to zoom, and you want to avoid using the dial unless you land on one of these three optical zoom points, the 0.5, the 1, or the 3. If you land on those, you're going to get optical zoom. It's going to actually look through the lens. It's not going to use software to stretch the image and blow it up. So those are things, if you can avoid doing those things, you're going to have a higher quality image. So the other question that came up there was about night mode. And notice, do you see that little yellow capsule right up here that says 1S? That's night mode kicking in because I'm in a very low light situation right now with the way I have things set up here. Watch what happens. I'm going to turn off one of my lights. And now it just got darker. And now it says 1S up there. So that's for 1 second. If I move over to a darker area, let me see if I can get it to do this. Well, all right, let's just try turning off the other light. And now I'm in a very dark situation. There's a little light on my little water fountain over there. But notice now that little capsule where it says that's the night mode icon. It's telling me it's going to shoot for, if I hold still here, it's going to shoot for 10 seconds. Well, what that means is it's not really a 10-second exposure. The camera is going to decide what values, what settings to choose, what ISO, what shutter speed, all of that. And then it's going to shoot with those settings for 9 seconds. And it's going to do that the whole time you're holding the phone. When it's done, it's going to take all the images that it made during all the photographs it took during that 9 seconds, and it's going to use computational photography to pull all that together and give you a much better image than you could have gotten without that night mode. So it won't come on unless it's low, the light is low enough to require night mode to kick in. You can handhold this and get great results. Like, so most of the time, if you're out in an evening at night in a city street, you can get some really nice photographs hand holding. If you want to shoot something like the moon, which is full right now, or night stars in the sky, you really need a tripod for that. And the gyroscope in the camera will know that you're on a tripod, and it will allow the camera to fire for 30 seconds. So you get 30 seconds of images photographed at whatever the settings the camera has chosen given the light, and then computationally it will put all those together. You probably won't be able to get 30 seconds unless you're on a tripod, because the gyroscope will know that you're too much motion. So again, this is not available on all the phones. I think it's the 11 on, and it's gotten more sophisticated with the latest version of the phone. But I don't know. Let me just try this. I'm going to tap for focus, and this is really, really dark. I'm sitting almost virtually in the dark here, and I'm going to tap the shutter and watch what happens. I'm holding still, and see how it's counting down and shooting for all those seconds. It's counting down 3, 2, 1. And there's our image. And if we go out and look at that image, if you could see how dark it is in here, you would be amazed at that image. I mean, it's not perfect by all means, but I'm practically in the dark. So if I had a little bit more light here, I would be getting a decent result. So it's a wonderful tool. I use it all the time. Also, in the last 2 years, I've been shooting infrared with my iPhone. And one of the best options that we have is to use night mode with a infrared filter on the camera, and the camera is tricked by the dark infrared filter, and it believes it's dark out, and so it invokes night mode. And night mode then it'll shoot for maybe 1 to 3 seconds, and using computational photography puts all that together, and we get a really nice infrared image. It's another topic. I'll send you a link. We've got a Facebook or Facebook group where people are talking about it and sharing information. And I've got some resources on that if you're interested, but it's really a lot of fun. So let's go back here to the interface. And the last thing that I wanted to show you here with just the settings and the shooting stuff here, if I want to focus, if I don't tap on the screen somewhere, the camera is going to focus for me. And so if I just point my camera at this scene, in this case, it's focusing on the frog in the foreground. And if I want to ensure that it focuses there, I'm going to tap on that spot. And if I want, I can hold my finger down to a long press. And I don't know if you saw it jump around like that, but it now has auto locked the auto focus and auto exposure for that shot. Now I can take my finger and drag up and down and set the exposure, or I could go up to that where it says plus 0.3, and I could tap there and go down and get my value here. But my focal point is locked. So now I can move around. I can take all kinds of shots at that distance with that light, and I don't have to reset everything. And then to turn it off, I'm just going to tap my finger. If I wanted to focus on the shake array in the background, I can tap back there. And now when I take the photo and go look at it in the camera roll, the frog is soft and the shake array in the background is sharp. So that's one of the things that you can do to kind of guide, choose where you want your focal point and work with your sharpness and exposure. When you're shooting outside doing a landscape and so on, you're usually far away. I'm very close to these little subjects here. So I'm going to have a shallow depth of field. When I'm outside shooting a landscape, pretty much everything is going to be in focus because these lenses are very wide. So it's not as big an issue, but it's just a nice way of controlling things and managing the exposure values. So it's a different way of thinking than we do with the big camera, where we're using focus differently. Okay, I think that's everything that I wanted to share just on the native camera. This would probably be a good time if there are questions about what I just covered to address those before moving on to the next topic. Vicki, do we have anything out there related to these?
How do you get how do you get to direct your photos to a folder rather than default to photo?
Well, they're always going to default to the camera roll. When you take a photograph, like right now, I'll just go ahead and take a photograph. When I go to my camera roll, these are albums I've created, but there's my camera roll and there's that photo I just took. If I want to move it to a folder or someplace else, I can do that by choosing the share icon down at the bottom, the little box with an arrow, tap on that, and I can say, move it to an album that I've created or whatever. So you can organize your files. Anything else?
Yeah, somebody wanted to know if you had an example of the infrared.
I do. If there's time at the end, I'll share that. Otherwise, I'm going to send you a link to the Facebook group we have, and you can see all kinds of examples out there. We have so much to cover. If you don't mind, I'd rather save that and let you look at those on your own. There are a lot of places you can see what we're doing.
Somebody asked if you needed the tripod for the long exposure.
You don't. You can get great results hand holding, but as I said, if you want to shoot like stars, you'll want to have a 30-second time frame to shoot, and it won't do that unless it's on a tripod. But for most walking around at night shots, you can get remarkable results hand holding.
Okay. Do you need to set a 3-second shutter? I don't know if they meant 3 or 30 there, but it says, do you need to set a 3-second shutter?
No, when you're in the raw mode, or I'm sorry, let me go back to the camera. When you're in night mode, when night mode is evoked, so if I let me turn my lights off again. So as soon as I turn off the lights, it senses that it's dark. And right now my door just cracked open, so it's not as dark as it was before. But there it's a 6-second exposure, a 5-second exposure. It's going to set that automatically. Now you can tap on that little capsule, and you can dial down if you don't want it to be as long, but you can. I want it to shoot as long as it's going to allow me to shoot for that light. And so the dial, it's saying maximum right now for this light is 5 seconds. I hope that answered the question. Anything else?
That's it for the moment concerning that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see. So I wanted to take a look at, go through some of the camera features of the different shooting modes. I'm not going to get into video. You have all these different video options that are great, but I'm not going to get into those. I want to just share with you, we kind of looked at the photo, but there's also a portrait mode and a pano mode that are really remarkable tools. One thing I want to show you on photo before I move on, if you want to take a burst photo, a burst of a number of shots, you can do that. It used to be in the earlier phones, and I think some of them may still be that way. If you wanted to take a burst of photos, you would hold your finger down on the shutter button. Today on the later phones, what you do, I'll do it right now. You just take your finger and you sort of grab the shutter button and pull it to the left. So watch what happens. I just took 30 photos. So if I go out and look at the camera roll, it's telling me, I guess it was 31. I took 31 photos by doing that burst. Well, why would you ever want to do that? Well, if you're trying to get a single frame, like a single scene, like the dog catching the Frisbee, or the volleyball player spiking the ball at that precise moment, then you're going to want to use a burst. And if I'll show you an example of a way that I used it for this photo of a dancer in Cuba. So this guy is a modern dancer. He's an amazing athlete, and he's about to do a leap. And I wanted to get him at the top of his jump. Well, I couldn't time that to be perfect. So what I did was I shot a burst of 21 photos. So if I go down to the bottom, after shooting the burst, I go into the camera roll and I'm going to tap select, and there are all the images. So there's where I started shooting. He's standing there, and then he starts to build up, and there he's going to jump. And there is the shot that I wanted. But I used burst, and I picked the one I wanted out of all of these 21 shots. And then when you find the one you want, you simply tap on it. It selects it with a check mark, and then you can pull that image out of the pile and proceed to work on it and do editing or whatever you want. But that's just a really cool feature if you're shooting sports, or kids running around or playing with your pets or whatever. It can be a really useful tool. So let's go back here. So I want to move on to with the other features of the phone here. The portrait mode is a remarkable tool, and it's been around since about the iPhone 7 Plus, I think. What it's doing something with depth mapping, so it's allowing you to focus on something. Let's see, there we go. That helps if I turn both lights on. It allows you to focus on something that can be sharp and then have the background drop off into a beautiful soft blur. And so to do that, I'm shifted to the portrait mode. You see down below it says portrait, and this is going to be different on each phone. It started out with the 7 Plus, and each phone got a little more sophisticated. So you might see things here that you don't see on your version of this, but it's very similar. So first thing you notice, if I come in here and aim at the frog here and kind of focus on it, it tells me to move farther away. It wants you to be farther away from the subject. And so I'm going to move back until it turns, the natural light button turns yellow. And you can see it down there. When it's yellow, you know you are at the right focal length. You're the right distance from your subject. And I'm going to just tap my shutter, and it's taken the photo. Now, I could have set my f-stop. Right now it says it's at f16. I could have chosen a different light mode. I could have done all those things before I took the photo, but I find it's a whole lot easier to take the photo with the natural light setting and then edit it after you take it, which you can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the image in the camera roll, and there it is. And you notice up in the upper left, it tells me it's a portrait mode photo made with the portrait camera. So what I'm going to do is use the camera's editor, the iOS editor, it's the editor in the camera roll right down here at the very bottom. And I'm going to tap on edit. And there it brings me into the portrait editor portion of the iOS editor. Well, let me zoom in a little bit I'm going to do a 2-finger zoom here to get closer. And if I go up to the F16 and tap on that, it puts a dial down below. You can see it says F16, and there's a dial. Watch what happens as I decrease the f-stop. Look how the background is increasingly blurred. I can go all the way down to a simulated f-stop of 1.4. So there's no aperture on the iPhone. There's no physical aperture like there is on a big camera, but these numbers are indicating a very wide open aperture like you would have on a big camera, or a very closed up aperture like f16. When you have the wider aperture, you have the background. Look at how beautiful that is. I mean, you've got this really sharp subject, and then the background is really just cool. This is great for portraits, for pets, for flowers. Anything you want to isolate like this can be done. And once you've got that there, you notice there's also a little cube down at the bottom. If I tap on the cube, that's going to allow me to change the light mode. So there's natural light. That's what we shot it in. But after the fact, look at I can change it to studio light. Look how it brightened the frog. Then I can go to contour light. Then I can go to stage light. And look at that. Now I have spotlighted the frog. I think this is just so cool. It is so much fun to do this with portraits. On the later phones, the 13, I can also go into a mono, stage light mono, and then the 13 has the high key background dropout. You won't see that on the earlier phones, but it is on, I think, the 12 and the 13. So this is a really phenomenal tool that lets us get some really remarkable images. And if we go to, I'm going to go out to my camera roll here, and I want to show you what this looks like on a portrait. So this was taken, let's just swipe up here and see, this was taken with the iPhone XS. So this was in 2019, several generations ago. And watch what happens here. It tells me that it was taken with portrait mode. And at the time, HDR was something that showed up here. Now it's automatic, HDR is built in. But what I'm going to do is tap on the editor here, and there's our image. And if I look up, it tells me that the f-stop is a simulated 4.5. Well, if I tap on that, I can take it all the way up to 16, and now the whole image is from front to back is relatively sharp. But watch what happens as I drop my f-stop down. Watch the background. I'm at 2.8 all the way down. I can take it all the way down to 1.4, and look at that. That's incredible. It's just a beautiful portrait. Her face is tack sharp, and the background is this soft bouquet behind her. Now I can tap on the cube, and now I can just select and adjust the light. So there is natural light, but watch what happens when I go to studio. Look how brightened her face. There's before, there's the studio light, brightened her face beautifully. There, the next one is contour light, which doesn't do anything for this image, but it might for another. And now look at that, stage light. Suddenly we've just put a spotlight on her, and we've dropped the background out. Now I can save this. I can take it into SnapSeed. I can work with the portrait editor in SnapSeed and just do a beautiful job of bringing out her skin and eyes and all of that. I just really love this tool, and I use it all the time. And I mean, here's another photograph that I did of this was a young couple on one of our recent workshops that we just encountered at the botanical gardens. But again, if I tap on edit here and go down, well, actually, I've got the wrong one. Never mind. But I've already saved it, so it's locked in. But the original is somewhere else. But I was able to drop the background out of this image, just like I did with the image of the woman with the flowers from Cuba. So really cool tool. And I encourage you to explore it and have fun with it. It's just amazing. And again, I find it easier to kind of get that image right the way you want it. If I wanted, I could play with these settings now, but I prefer to do it after I've taken the shot. It's just a lot easier to do than trying to, especially with stage light. It's really hard to get the stage light to come out right. It's much easier to take the shot initially and then change it to stage light after. So that's my tip on that. So let's go ahead and back out of that. All right. So the last feature here that I wanted to talk about in the native camera is the Pano tool. And, I don't know, as I do workshops with people, the panos, I think, are one of the things that we neglect to do. Even with our big cameras, they can be good. But the iPhone makes doing a panorama remarkably simple, and the results are phenomenal. And the way it's basic, the way it works. As you look through here, I'm in the pano mode now, and it's giving me instructions to move the iPhone continuously as I take my panorama. So the idea is to tap the shutter button and then move the camera so that the arrow stays on the yellow line. It takes a little practice to get it right, but watch what happens. I'm going to go ahead, tap the shutter button. I don't have to hold it. I'm just going to tap it. And now I'm moving to the right. Now it's telling me to slow down because I'm in very low light. If you're outside on a bright sunny day, you're not going to get that. And I could go all the way to the end, or I can stop there and reverse motion. I don't have to tap the shutter button again, just reversing motion. I stopped at that point. So I took a partial pano, which is really cool. I can't do that with my Fuji. With my Fuji, I got to go all the way to the end of the line. But there are times when you just want a partial, and it works great. When you're in, you can choose any of the lenses or the cameras that you have. There's the 5, the 1, or the 3. You can choose any of those. It does not take a raw photo. It's just a standard JPEG or HEIF, whichever you've selected. If you want to start from the other side of the phone and move this way, if you just tap your finger opposite the arrow, it switches. And now you can go that way and stop, and there's your partial pano. The other thing that you can do here is to do a vertical pano. So a vertical pano, you're simply going to turn the phone in a horizontal position, and I'll do one right here. You're not going to really see it on the camera, on the zoom, because it doesn't change. but I've got my camera in a horizontal position. I'm going to tap the button, and now I'm just going to go up. And when I'm done, I'll reverse motion, and there's my vertical pano. So, and I didn't focus, so I was really hasty in that. But let me show you what these look like, and how cool they can be. I'll go out here to, where are you? Here we go. My pano example. So here's a, turn that sideways so you can see it bigger. This was in a church in Ohio, and I wanted to show the beautiful stained glass and the church. Now, you notice the pews are curved. This is a really rare church where the pews are not really. That's distortion. So the closer you are to your subject, the more of that distortion you can get, which I find to be a benefit, not a flaw. I like that. I use it creatively. But the further you are from your subject, the less of that kind of distortion you'll get. So if you do a different pano, you won't get it. Like here, this is a vertical pano made out in the Palouse along Summer Road in the Palouse, and then that incredible sky. I couldn't have made that photo any other way, really, but doing a pano, it let me do it. This is in Calabria. And again, this incredible scene in front of me, I could have used a wide angle lens, but it would have been a very different photograph. This allowed me to use a longer lens and zoom in, or not zoom in, but use a longer lens to get closer and get this pano that way. Here's another one from Calabria. And here I want to point out, when you do this, before you take your shot, you want to tap on the screen. What I do is find the brightest area in the scene, like this cloud, for example, and I would tap right there and hold my finger down and lock in the focus and exposure. Now, because it's so far away, everything's going to be in focus, but it's going to take a light reading from here. And because I lock it, when I move through the pano sequence, it's not going to constantly be trying to readjust the exposure. Now, when you do that, it might be that the darker areas in the image might turn out a little too dark, but it's really easy to lift those in post-production, or post-processing rather. You can lift the shadows, but you can't always recover blown out highlights in the clouds. So those are some of my things that I enjoy about using these panos. Oh, here's another one. I have to show you this one. Here's another reason to take a vertical pano. This is a church in Italy, and I love the floor and the sanctuary, or the altar and the ceiling. I couldn't have made that photo without doing a pano like this. I could have used a wide angle lens, but it'd be a very different photograph. You also get some odd distortion. These are not parallel paths or parallel parts of the city. Because I'm standing at the intersection of those, and when I did the pano, it gives me this bizarre perspective, like I'm looking down all three at once, but I'm not. They're all around me in different ways. So it's really fun. You get some really crazy images, and some of them are just really beautiful. Look at this one in Tuscany. No way could I have done this photograph without doing a pano to get that rolling hill and those cypress trees. And then I did some processing and grunged it up a little bit, which is part of what I enjoy doing. But anyway, that's my spiel on panos. I'm constantly reminding my folks on my groups to take a pano, because they're so much fun. All right, so the last thing here before we go on to take a look at some of the other editor tools, I want to say a word about the iOS editor in SnapSeed. And let me go back to our folder here, and let's see, iOS editor. Let's get this image right here, and you'll notice this image is a raw file, and I'm in the camera roll looking at the image, and I'm going to tap on the edit button. And when I do, it shows me down below, these are my editing tools, but notice it says revert. It means I've already edited this once as a raw file, but it's showing me the edited version in the camera roll. But all I have to do to get back to the original is tap revert. And it allows me to revert to the original file. So now there is my original raw file. What I'm going to do is edit this. Now, this was taken with the, well, let's just look, the 12 Pro Max, and that means it was taken with ProRAW, the iPhone's proprietary RAW format. The iOS editor, the iPhone editor, is perfect for editing ProRAW because it really knows what's in that ProRAW file better than most other non-Apple editors do. So I'm going to tap on Edit, and this is what the editor looks like. And these are the adjustments that I can make. And you recognize these from other apps. They're all the same things. Highlights and exposure. Brilliance might be a new one. But what I do, here's my workflow for this image. I'm going to start with an auto adjustment, not because that's what I expect to end with, but it's a starting point. So I'm going to tap auto, and it just did some adjustments. You see the yellow lines that showed up on these other adjustments. That's what the auto adjustment did. Now I can proceed and tweak it even further. So if I go to exposure, I can brighten it or I can darken it. I'm going to darken it just a little bit. If I go to brilliance, brilliance is a weird thing. It's kind of like ambiance in Snapseed. It's a combination of different things. I'm not exactly sure what it's doing, but if I move brilliance, look at how it's affecting the foreground as I slide it back and forth. So a lot of times you're going to experiment with these and find a sweet spot that works for what you're trying to do with your image. The next thing here is highlights. And highlights is like a brightness slider for the highlights in the image. Watch the sky as I drop the highlights down. I'm bringing in some drama into that sky. If I go the other way, I'm just going to kind of really brighten it up. But if I drop it down, I can get those clouds to show up a little bit more. And I just like to drop my highlights down. Shadows, if I lift them, look how I can brighten the foreground, or I can drop it down a little bit and have a little more drama in the image. Contrast, a little contrast goes a long way, but you can see, and again, sometimes just maxing these sliders out to see what they do. And the adjustments can be just very subtle to get what you want. There's brightness again. You can brighten or darken the image. I'm going to go for darker. My black point is going to look what it does to the dark areas in the image. And if I lift it up, there might be times when I want the detail to show more in that tree. But in this case, I'm going to drop it down and have the tree be more silhouetted. Then I've got saturation here, all the things that you'd find in any editor. And then at the end, I have sharpness. A little sharpness can go a long way. And I often zoom in and move my sharpness slider. See how I can have just overdone it? So usually I stay under about 20 and watch the image carefully. Definition is like structure in Snapseed or other tools. You can tolerate a little bit more structure and it's going to give you some definition throughout the image. You can reduce noise if you need to. I usually zoom in on my sky. I don't see a lot of noise in that image, but if I did, I could use the noise reduction to help me a little bit. And then I can always add a vignette to the image. Now, this vignette you don't have any control over it other than darkening the edges. So I don't typically use a vignette here, but you have that capability. So now, and I don't know if you saw that, if you tap on the screen, it shows you the original for a second. So there's the original and there's after our edits. So now I can say done. And there is our edited image. And if we look in the camera roll, that's the same image that we just edited, but we haven't destroyed the original. If I tap on that, just like when we started, I can come up to the edit button and I can tell it's been edited because I can revert it to the original. So it's non-destructive in that way. You never lose your original image. Let's see. So again, that editor, I used it on a raw file, but you can use that editor to edit any image from your camera roll. And it is today a remarkable editor. It didn't used to be. Nobody used to use it, but now it's gotten so good that I use it quite frequently. All right, let's go into Snapseed. And for that image, I'm going to get this image right here. This is a photograph I made in, oh gosh, it's been 2 years ago. Well, here it tells us October of 2020 here in Indiana, just driving country roads. And I love the scene. And I'm going to go ahead and let's go out to Snapseed. So Snapseed, and by the way, I don't do this anymore looking for images. It's just crazy. I simply take my finger in the center of the phone and swipe down, and I get the search bar. And I type the name of the app that I want, and it pops up. Or I look here, and the last 8 apps I've used are going to be right here. So I'll tap on Snapseed, and there's the interface for Snapseed. I'm going to tap anywhere on the screen, and it's going to give me some options. Among them, open from the device, which is the camera roll. So I'm going to tap on that, and it takes us out to our camera roll. Well, I'm going to go to the albums I've created, and I'm going to go in here and get that photo, and there it is right there. I'm just going to tap on it, and it brings me into a preview area, and I'm going to say, yeah, that's the one I want, and I'm going to tap the use button, and now I'm in Snapseed. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how Snapseed works. I'm just going to show a few things. If you want more information about Snapseed, you'll find some things on my YouTube channel, and I also have some 90-minute webinars that are that cover a lot of these details in detail. So what I'm going to do with this image, I'm going to show you my basic process for any image. Well, not a raw image. So Snapseed will process raw, but I'm not going to show you that tonight because it's a little bit convoluted and it takes a lot of time. This is what I do with most non-raw images. I start out by tapping on Tools down here. I get the toolkit and I go into Tune Image. I tap on that, and if I slide up and down, these are all the different things I can adjust. Well, I start with ambiance, because ambiance is kind of a combination of brightness, contrast, and saturation. So watch what happens to the image. Sorry, as I'm going to slide my finger across the front of the phone, and I'm just going to bring it up. I'm going to take it all the way up to 100. Well, that's probably too much, but look at the difference. There's before, and I'm holding my finger on the screen to show that, and then releasing, and there's after. Excuse me. This is a really remarkable adjustment. And it works on most images. I usually start there. Now, you also notice down here, I have a histogram. If you don't see that, you might see a button like this. If you tap on that button, it'll produce your histogram. So this can help you in making these adjustments. The next thing I'm going to do is slide down to highlights. And highlights, if we look at this is the area most affected by that, by the brightest spot. If I bring my highlights up, I've just lost all the detail in that bright area of the image. So I'm going to take my highlights down, and if I take them into the negative, look how I can control, excuse me, and sort of bring in some of the detail back into that image. If I zoom in, you can see a little bit more of what's going on there. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to move quick. Gosh, there's just never enough time, is there? Okay, so the next thing I would do here is go up to, I just committed to that change. Now I'm going to go to Details, tap on Details, and I can adjust structure and sharpening. So I'm going to bring my structure up and my sharpening, but I might need to zoom in and see how it's affecting the image because I don't want to overdo it. That looks pretty good. But I'm adding some noise in the sky. There is a way, I'm not going to have time to show you this, but one of the things that you can do in Snapseed is you can actually mask that area so that that sharpening that we did, I can say, hey, don't put the sharpening in the sky. Or I can drop my structure down and smooth the sky out, smooth the whole image out, but tell Snapseed only to put the smoothing in the sky and leave the texture and the sharpening and the structure in the rest of the image. What I want to show you at this point, that's kind of the workflow that I do. I do the ambiance in the toolkit and the tune image palette and structure and sharpening. And I might do some masking, but what I'm going to do now is save this. I'll commit to that change. I'm going to go to export and export. I'm going to choose save a copy of this Snapseed edited image. I prefer this over any of the other two options because it saves the layers that I've created, and I can go back in, open the image again, and edit those layers. So I'm going to choose save a copy. And the original still is in the camera roll where we first got it. And now we have a copy saved to the camera roll. And I'm going to go out to the camera roll. And there's the image that I just saved from Snapseed right there. And what I'm going to do a hard press or a long press on that image. And when I do, it gives me a menu, and I'm going to copy that image. And now it's on a clipboard. Now I'm going to go out to touch, retouch, tap on that, and there's a icon that says paste the image that you have on the clipboard. I'll tap on that, and boom, there's our image in touch, retouch. I'm going to see if I can turn this sideways. Oh yeah, that's better. So now what I want to do, and this is probably the best tool for this I've ever seen, I want to get rid of those lines, those telephone lines. So I'm going to come down here to the lines tool, tap on it. I'm going to go over here and make sure that I'm in auto. I can toggle between auto and manual, and I want it to be auto. And then I'm going to tap on settings, and I just want to make sure I'm using the thin option here because I've got a thin wire. So now I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit so I can see those better. And I'm going to take my finger, and I'm going to start with this bottom wire, and I'm just going to drag my finger along that wire. Look at that. Then I'll do it again on the next one and the next one. And I'm just dragging close. I'm not even, I'm going to zoom in a little more to see better. And last one. And now look at that. I mean, that is truly amazing. We have gotten those wires out of there, and it was relatively easy to do. I'm going to come over to the share icon up here in the upper right, tap on that, and I'm going to save a copy of this image that I just edited, and it's going to put it out in the camera roll, and there's the image without the wires. And now I'm going to take it back into the Snapseed and do one last thing. And to do that, I'm going to show you a shortcut for how to take something into Snapseed. We're in the camera roll, there's the image, and I'm just going to press on the image, and I get that same menu where I copy the image to a clipboard. Now I'm going to go to Snapseed, and there it is in my tray. Instead of tapping to open it, I'm going to hold my finger on it, long press, and I get a menu, and I can paste it into Snapseed. And voila, there's our image without the lines. Now I'm going to do one last thing that I love to do in Snapseed. I'm going to go over and tap the pencil, and I'm going to go to Vintage, which is one of the stylizing tools that you have. And you have 12 different color palettes here that you can choose. Notice how as I tap each one, it's giving us a little bit of different look. I'm going to go to number 12 here, and look at that. There's before and there's after. Now it's a little dark, so I'm going to slide my finger up and down, and I see it's got a vignette of 30, and I'm going to drop that vignette down maybe to 20. And now there's before and there's after, maybe a little more. And I just find that to be a very attractive image. Now, there were steps that we could have taken to eliminate some of the noise in the sky here. I just didn't want to take the time because we're getting so close to the end. And I do want to get to a couple more things before we close. So the last two things are, well, boy. All right, I'm going to do two things out of three instead of trying to do all of them. And I realize we're very close to the end of our time. I don't mind staying a little longer if you don't, but I don't want to keep you unwillingly. So the next thing I want to do, I want to show you this funky little app called Average Cam Pro. and I just typed in A and it popped up average cam. That's it right there. And I want to show you this because it's so much fun, and I really think you'll enjoy creating with it. It's 12 years old. I can't believe it still works. And half the buttons in here, I don't think they actually do anything. But what it does so well. So this is the interface. You can't choose different lenses. You can only use the 26mm lens. That's how old it is. But if you go down to the bottom and tap on settings, what this camera lets you do is take multiple exposures in the camera. So it's a way of doing intentional camera movement to get an effect. It's great for flowers. It's great for fountains, trees. I'll show you some images in a minute. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go down. I can choose how many pictures I want it to take with one press of the shutter, either from 1 all the way up to, what is that, 100 and I can't even see, 126. I usually focus around 8 or so, but try whatever you want. The next thing you have down here, well, I'm not going to set that one right now. This lets you choose like a number of seconds between each of those 8 shots, which is useful if you're trying to walk around a fountain and take a photograph at intervals. It gives you you can choose 5 seconds between shots, so it gives you time to reposition. So all I'm going to do here, and by the way, it's got a slow shutter button. I have no idea. It doesn't seem to have any effect on the image. So what I'm going to do, once I've got that set, I'm going to tap on settings. And now I'm ready to take my shot, and I'm going to move my camera while it's firing. So here goes. I'm going to tap the camera button, which is the shutter button down below, and I'm going to rotate the camera. So there's our image. I'm going to tap save. If I don't, it's not going to save it. If I hit X, it would just throw it away. So you want to make sure you save, and then OK. And now if we go and look at there's the image in the camera roll. No, I mean, that's nothing to write home about, but you can see how it's allowing you to take these multiple exposures. Well, here's what I've done with it. And I just have so much fun with this. Let's see, if I go down to my tools here, here are some images that I've taken with Average Cam Pro. This is just a little tiny tree, not much taller than I am, at the end of my street. And I set the camera to take 8 photos with 5 seconds between each one. And I walked around in a circle around the tree. And each time it fired, I tried to line up the previous image, which I can see in the frame, with the tree so that it's just a slightly off. And you get this kind of Monet-like abstract. Here's another one. This is a garden at Longwood Gardens. And I just spun the camera while it was firing on a colorful palette of flowers. This was a marsh along Cape Cod. And again, just swipe the camera up to get that effect. And then I twisted the camera here using the red as an anchor in the image and had fun with that. And then I love doing swipes like this with trees. This one, I walked around this fountain. I took I think 8 shots with 5 seconds between each one. That gave me time to walk to another position in the circle around the fountain, taking a photo each time and trying to line up the fountain. And I get this, look at this. It's so much fun. I just think the effects here are really cool. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll give some of that a try. The very last thing that I'll show you here, and then I'll take whatever questions there are and we can wrap up. This last app I want to show you is a really fun app. It's called Distressed FX Plus. Whoops, I didn't type it right. There it is. It's this one right here. Notice there are 2. This is the old one, and it still works, but this is the one you want. It's a little more expensive than most apps, but it's not a subscription. You buy it once, and it's full of stuff. And the creator, Cheryl Tarrant, is constantly creating new textures and things that we can use. This is what the interface looks like. To get an image, I'm going to go tap the camera, choose a photo, and I'm going to navigate out to our album. And let's see, let's get that image that we already worked with and pop it into Distressed FX. So here's a undo button. You've got you can't take two fingers and pinch on this image, but if you tap this icon up here, it lets you zoom it around and look at what you're doing. A little different than most apps. The rest of this you can look at. You can choose a JPEG or a PNG here. This is your share icon to save your image. Down below, you have a row of gels and a row of textures. And just you can go through and just tap on each of these, and you can see it applies it to the image. If I tap on, let's choose this one right here, notice it says multiply here. Well, that's a blend mode. And a blend mode is just instructions to the software on how to blend that gel with the image. If I tap on that icon right here, there are the other blend modes I can choose. It's in multiply now, but there's overlay, hard light, soft light. It's only 4. And sometimes, depending on the image, you may choose a different one. I'm going to go with multiply for this. Then down below, I can choose a filter or a texture to go on top of that. And so they're all different, and sometimes it'll make you crazy trying to pick one. I'm just going to pick something. I don't like that. Let's pick that. Anyway, and so now we've added a texture. And again, I can go down here and I can choose a blend mode for that. Kind of like, ooh, soft light's kind of cool. And so I'll tap on that. And now if I tap here on the sliders, I can adjust the opacity of both the gel and the texture. I can slide that down and kind of soften the harshness of the texture. But then over here, I can brighten the image with this slider or darken it. I've got a contrast slider over here, so I can affect the contrast of the image. And then I can drop the color out with this image down below. It's the color of the original image. So you can kind of play around. And then when you've got things the way you want, I'll tap the X. And now if it's got a masking feature built in. So if I tap right here, tap on that icon, I can choose how big an area I'm going to affect, like my brush size. And then this is opacity or transparency, how much I'm going to take away. And I'm going to set it to take away, so the minus sign is on. And now I'm just going to take my finger on the screen and I'm going to wipe away the texture so that it's not covering this part of the image. It's still covering the sky, which is kind of cool, but it's not covering down here. And so you can decide how you want that to work. I'll click the check mark, and there's our image stylized with those filters and textures. And if I wanted, I could actually add some birds, which is always fun. And I can position those where I want them. I can make them a little opaque or a little more transparent rather. And now there's our image. And how cool is that? And you've got different, these are just two, there's one gel pack here and one texture pack, but then you have all of these, you can switch to other different packs here, which are really cool. And then the thing I really like about this, you can get these other texture packs, but you can also add your own textures. So if you create your own textures, or you purchase textures from another source like flypaper textures or one of those, you can actually import your own texture and put it on this image. Very, very fun. So I'm aware of the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions and not keep you too far over. But let's stop there and see what questions there might be.
Okay, yeah, we've got a few here. Let's see. What is your opinion of Pro Camera app?
Pro Camera's a good tool. I don't use it very much because I have others that I prefer. I subscribe to the Adobe Creative Cloud so that I have Lightroom on my desktop. And when I do that, I get a version of Lightroom that works on my iPhone. And the Lightroom camera, in my opinion, is superior to Pro Camera. But if you're not a subscriber to Lightroom and you don't want that, you can either use a free version of Lightroom, which is has a few things missing, or Pro Camera is a good option.
Okay. Can you use the Apple Pencil to edit photos?
If you're working on your iPad, the iPad has a special pencil. I don't use the iPad very much. Thankfully, my eyes allow me to work on the phone. But my understanding is there is a special stylus for the iPad. that you can use. I also have a stylus that I use. It's not the same kind of stylus that works on the iPad. It's just a basic stylus that I purchased for $20 that I use to occasionally to on the phone. But honestly, most often I use my finger. It seems to work just fine.
Okay. How do you mask in SnapSeed?
Well, I'm happy to show you that, but I mean, is that okay? I mean, I don't want to keep you too long. I don't mind, but I'll show you really quickly. So
Sure.
here's this image that we were working on. I opened Snapseed. It's still there, and the sky is very noisy. You see that? What I'm going to do is get my tools. I'm going to go to structure. I'm going to zoom in on that area so I can see it, and I'm going to drop my structure down. And look how I smoothed out the sky. But the problem is, or not the problem, but the thing is, that was a global smoothing that I just did. When I commit here to that change, I've just globally smoothed out the structure for the whole image. I only want to smooth this area. Well, how do I do that? I come up here to the history icon at the top, tap on that, choose View Edits right here. And now there are my layers that I've done. I'm going to go into Details, and I'm going to choose the masking brush right here. I'll tap on it, and it's showing me this image without the smoothing effect there yet. In the masking view, I don't see that smoothing. What I'm going to do is tell Snapseed where to put the smoothing. So what I'm going to do is turn on this little blue eyeball here, and I'm going to paint in this area and say, hey, smooth out the sky right here. And I'm going really fast. And if I turn off this little blue arrow, it takes it out. You can see that it's very smooth there. And now when I commit to that, there's our image. The rest of the image still has the sharpening in it and the structure, but the sky is all smooth and creamy again. That's how you mask in Snapseed. My 90-minute webinar on this covers it in detail. And these webinars they're like $20. They're not very expensive, and they cover a lot of material. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, definitely check those out.
Okay. All right. There's several touch retouch apps. What is the icon for this version you used today?
This one right here, it looks like it's a pencil built into shape of a 6.
Okay.
And it's one word. It's called Touch Retouch, all one word with the R capitalized. And it works on iPhone and Android.
Okay. How do you move your iPhone photos to hard drive on computer with all the edits done on the phone?
Well, I have Macintosh equipment, so one of the easiest ways. Now, I also use the cloud, so I can see my images on all my devices. But if I wanted to, let me go out to my camera roll here. If I wanted to move this image to my computer so I could edit it there, I would go down to the share icon, and I would choose AirDrop, or in this case, I'm already set up, and I would AirDrop that image to my iMac, and boom, it's there. And there it is in the, you can't see that because I'm sharing my phone, not my desktop, but it shows up in my download folder on my Mac. That's the easiest way, and you can do multiple files that way, not just one. You can choose a whole bunch. If you're using a PC and an iPhone, they don't talk to each other the same way, but there's an app called Photo Sync, and you put a version on your computer and a version on your iPhone, and you can transfer images that way.
Okay. Is focus stacking possible to control depth of field? And if so, how simple is it?
Oh gosh, with the iPhone, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that you would take these images to the big computer and do your focus stacking there using whatever tool you use, Photoshop or whatever. I don't do much focus stacking at all. So I mean, these images, they're the same. They're just files created with a different camera. So I don't know enough about the process of focus stacking to tell you if it's possible, but I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Okay. Can you create a virtual copy of an image?
When you say virtual copy, so here's our image right here that we just have. If I tap on edit, it's not a raw file or anything. This was taken with the Average Cam Pro. If I go down to the share icon down here, I get a bunch of options, and one of them is to duplicate the image. So if I duplicate it, now I have two images in the camera roll. I don't do that hardly at all because I don't see the need for it, because if you were to take this image, for example, into SnapSeed and work with it, when you save it out of SnapSeed, it's going to leave this image just the way it is in the camera roll and add the new edited version, the SnapSeed version in the camera roll. So I don't see the need for that, but there may be one that I'm just not aware of.
Okay. Excuse me. Is it possible to import the photo in Lightroom without losing iPhone edits?
Well, I'm trying to think. I think so, but I'm not sure why you would want to. So here's my point. Let's say I've taken a raw file. Let me find a raw file here. One of these has got to be raw. Well, try it all. All right, there's a raw file. I shot this today out of my spring day walk, and so this is a raw file, and I can tell it's not been edited, so it's the original raw file. And if I want to, I don't want to make edits to it and take it to Lightroom, because I want to edit the raw file in Lightroom. The easiest way to do that is to tap the share icon and scroll across here until I come to Lightroom right here, and I'm going to tap on that, and I can say launch Lightroom right now and let me see that image. Now I'm in Lightroom on my phone, and where'd it go? Let's see. Recently added. There it is. There's the image. And now I'm going to use the more powerful raw editor in Lightroom to edit this image. So I don't know why I would want to take like Snapseed edits and bring them into Lightroom. What I might do is do all my processing of this raw file in Lightroom, save it to my camera roll, and then do some stuff with it in Snapseed, because I can stylize and do some cool things that way. I'm not sure. I don't mean to avoid your question, but so I guess I don't know the answer to your question, because if you edited an image and you had it in your camera roll and had, say, Snapseed edits, and you tried to take it into Lightroom, I'm not sure what would happen, because I don't ever do that. Because the only reason I take anything into Lightroom is because I want to use the powerful raw editor in Lightroom.
Okay. What's the file size for a Pano?
Well, let's go look. I don't know for sure. They get big. I know that. Let's see if I let's go down and look at some panos here.
And do you recommend using a tripod for Panos?
You really can't. You really have to have your hand. You have to be able to move. I've never done it with a tripod. I don't know. So let's just look at what this size is. This one was taken with the 13 Pro Max using the 77 millimeter lens, and it is a 61 megapixel. So it's really high resolution, and it takes up 12 megabytes of space. So that's an example. Now, each image is going to be a little different depending on the colors in the image and all of those things that add to the file size and so on. But the resolution is good.
Okay. Is stage light always centered in the circle, or does the center change if you crop the image and then edit?
Well, if you remember when we looked at that, that's a hard question to answer. So if I look at that, I guess, are you talking about if you try to set up stage light before you take the picture or when you're working with the image afterwards?
Don't know.
I don't know if you can unmute yourself and talk to me for a second about that, but.
Yes, I was wondering if the center of the image when you take the photo stays the same, or if there's any way to adjust that afterwards when you're editing.
It's really temperamental. And there isn't a way, there's no way to adjust like the size of it or position it where you want. That's why for me, this was taken with making that selection for stage light after the image was made. If you go into the portrait mode and you try to choose stage light like this, and I'm going to try and do it. I don't know if I can though. It's so hard. So right there, you would think that that would mean that the frog is going to be spotlighted, right?
Right.
Take the shot. But then when you go and look at it here, that's what we're seeing. And I can change some of that with you doing the f-stop adjustment. But you really can't, like, I don't like the spotlight being down here where it is and all that. I can't change that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's a good illustration.
So what you could do though, is take this, let's see if it works. I mean, you could take this image into Lightroom. And this might answer that other question too. This is the only reason I can think of doing that. So I'm going to take this into Lightroom. There's the image. And I don't know if you've used the new masking feature in Lightroom, but it is phenomenal. So we could go over here and go to masking in Lightroom, tap the plus sign here, get a radial gradient and drag it over. I don't know. This may not work. I'm just playing kind of with an idea. Drag it over the frog and then invert it. And now I could go to light here and drop the exposure on the rest of the image. You see what I'm doing?
Yes, thank you.
Pretty cool. Lightroom is amazing.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you avoid over sharpening?
Well, I zoom in on the image and watch it. And I've learned that if I go over, particularly with the iPhone, if I go over about 20, on most things, that's probably getting close to a limit. But the best way is to just you zoom in on the image and look very closely at it. Zoom in and then sharpen and see, and you can see what's happening if you zoom in. Things like tree branches or things that are very tiny little lines and things, those have a tendency to over sharpen very quickly. So you can see the over sharpening there. It's less easy to see it in something like a person's face, but you can. But that's what I do. I zoom in and watch.
Okay. Is there a manual focus control?
Manual focus control. Well, nothing like you would experience with a big camera. I mean, mostly when we were looking before, I showed how you tap on the screen. If you tap in the foreground, it's going to focus there. If you tap on the background item, it's going to focus there. That's about as close as you can get to managing your focal point with the regular photo option camera. But if you go to portrait mode, it's all about how you frame the image. There's really not other controls, if I'm understanding your question.
Yeah.
The reason I had asked was because the Pro Camera app does have a full manual control over the focus, and I've been using that to create multiple images across the focus space of that camera on a single subject, and then combining them in Photoshop with focus stacking. So
very cool.
It would be nice if the iPhone itself had that full manual control, and I didn't have to go to the Pro Camera app to do that.
I understand. I don't know that it does at this point, but maybe that's something they'll add in the next generation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd love to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Go to the Berkeley Camera Club website, and you can see some of my winning images there.
Okay, Berkeley.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm not sure if this has already been answered. In portrait mode, how do you save the original photo and work on a copy?
Well, when you save, you are already doing that essentially. So you're working in the iOS editor right here. So this image has been edited, and so it's you're working on the original image, but you can always tap on edit and revert to the original. I suppose if you wanted, you could edit the image, you could duplicate that image, and now you have two. I guess that would be one way to do it. I'm not sure. I may not be answering your question.
Okay, this one I don't know exactly what it's referring to. How did he get to edit the portrait? How did you get to edit the portrait? I don't know.
Okay, so let's go. Let me just pick a portrait here. This is the one we've been working on. So I'm in the camera roll right here, and I find the image that I want to work on. This one's already been edited, but it's still there. If I tap on it, I'm going to this editor. It's the iOS editor. It's the editor in the camera roll. And when you tap on it, it takes you into the portrait editor portion of the of that iOS editor. What's cool about this is, we looked at the iOS editor for editing a RAW file or whatever. When you take a portrait, it knows it's a portrait and it allows you to edit it in this portrait editor. But the portrait editor is a subset of the iOS editor overall. So if I tap down here, I could get this image just the way I want it, and then come down here and tap on that icon. And now you recognize these other editing tools. So I can adjust exposure here. I can go to my shadows and drop those down. So I can edit in both ways. If you see this icon here, you are in a portrait, it's a portrait image made with the portrait camera. You can tap on that icon, and now you're back here to edit these other things in the portrait mode.
Okay, next, are burst photos sharper than live photos?
Well, they're different. A burst photo is no different than taking a single photograph. So it's going to give you it's just when you do a burst, it's taking them very rapidly. But the image resolution and the size of the image is the same as if you'd taken one shot. Live mode is taking a little video clip, essentially. So it's a totally different thing. Live mode's taking a little video clip. And let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about. I mean, it's I can't get out of here. Okay, so here's where's my live mode? So here's live photos, and well, here's something here. I don't know how good this is, but so live is taking a little video clip, and when you go into these exposures, you can choose all these different options. That's what the image looks like originally. If you look at the metadata for it, I would have to compare it. It's probably similar to taking a single photograph, but you also have these other options which come from having taken a video of that. So now I can, when I do long exposure, it's applying those other images to soften the water. So they're just different types of different way of making the photo.
Okay, is there a burst on V11? I guess version 11. I don't know what V11.
Yeah, burst has been around for a long time. On the On the earlier, I don't know. Again, here's where I don't have all of the. Let me see. Let me go back to burst here. I don't have all of the old phones, so I don't remember exactly how you do it on the old ones. But you should be able to either take your finger and drag like that, or simply do a long press on the shutter button, and it will do it that way. The earlier phones, it used to be you just did a long press on the shutter button to do a burst.
Is focus stacking possible to control depth of field? And if so, how simple is it?
Well, again, I think we talked about that question already. I don't do
I
focus stacking, and I think the gentleman who was asking a question before from the Berkeley Camera Club may be the guy to ask about that.
Yeah. Okay. What if we don't use Facebook but are interested in IR?
Send me an email, email to raddrewphotography.com and let me know, and I can I can send you some locations on my website that have some things and some articles that I've written about it.
Okay. What do you mean by photo roll?
Photo roll. I'm not sure I said that. If I did, I misspoke. It's the camera roll.
The camera roll, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes it gets interchangeably. Maybe it's labeled photo roll, but camera roll is where the images go after you take them. They all go to the camera roll.
Right. Okay. For night mode, how still do you have to hold the camera? Does the timer with the countdown have anything to do with how still you have to hold it?
Well, the longer you're shooting, I mean, you do want to be still. I usually try and brace myself if I can. It helps, but it's very forgiving. You'll be surprised. Again, the longer you shoot, in fact, sometimes you can't even shoot long unless you're on a tripod. So if you want to get that 30 seconds of shooting, you're going to need to be on a tripod. But for things anywhere from 1 to 10 seconds, you're going to be able to hand hold it, and you will be amazed at how good it is.
Yeah.
Handheld.
Yeah. Okay. I'm interested in buying the iPhone 13. Do you know when the 14 will come out?
Well, typically they come out every fall, like October or September, October, November, in that window. I haven't heard anything different, so I would expect it to come out at that time. There's a lot of rumors out there. You can always Google what's coming with the iPhone 14 and hear what people are talking about.
Okay.
I don't have any inside line on that.
Let's see. How still do you have to? Yeah, similar. Hold your phone in night mode when it says 3 seconds. 3 seconds. If you don't hold it dead still, will it blur? Yeah. I think
Nope.
Adjust it.
It's very. I mean, if you move a lot, you might have some problems, but generally, it's very forgiving. It does a great job.
Okay. Let's see. Can you take bursts with an 11 Pro? Where you can't slide to the left to take them? Yes. Okay.
You either slide to the left or long press on the shutter button. I just don't know which it is with that phone.
Okay.
But you can definitely take a burst.
Okay. Rad, let's maybe talk a second now about, what people can send you, and people, you're going to send it to a Dropbox link that Doug is going to send you. Okay. So Rad, what are you looking for the next?
Well, so we're going to do a follow-up in 2 weeks, and send me an image or two. I mean, of that you've done. What I'll do, there are assignments that are in those slides that I'm going to send, and the assignments are basically create some images using some of what I've shared with you tonight. So do a portrait mode, do a burst mode, do an average cam pro shot. And pick something that you like and send it to the Dropbox folder. And then next week, I'll go through as many of them as I can and offer my 2 cents about what I'm seeing, things, suggestions I might do differently if I were doing it, or just whatever, and answer questions. It's really going to depend on how many images we have and how many we can get through in the 90 minutes we have.
Okay. Any other last minute questions before we let Drew go? Okay, I guess not. Drew, thank you so much. It was really fun.
Let me turn this back over to you.
Yes, thank you.
Stop and share.
Okay.
And
Rad, it's Mike. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. I have a question for you. I mean, it's so totally amazing what these products, these iPhones are doing now. Is the future holding like a step away from in-camera to post-processing? Is that the direction we're headed?
boy, your guess is as good as mine, Mike. I don't know what to expect. I mean, I still enjoy shooting with my big camera, and I love to do the processing that I do on the desktop as well. I mean, I just see these all as different options. I don't know where we're headed. I think we're going to see some things like longer lenses in the iPhone that are going to let us do bird photography that we can't do today because we can't get a long enough lens. Those are the kinds of things I expect. And I think computational photography, where things are done using, the computer, are going to prevail in the future with the iPhone. We're already seeing that with the 12 and the 13. So I don't know. It's part of what's exciting about being involved in all this, kind of waiting to see what's next.
Yeah, what will the iPhone 20 be like?
I know. I hope I'm still alive to see
Yeah,
it.
no kidding. Will it fly? I mean, will it be a drone? I mean,
Help me, Obi-Wan. Help me.
yeah.
Did you ever get the file size of a still taken during a video?
The file size of a still taken during a video. So you mean you've got a video and you focus on just take a still out of the video and then look at the file size of it?
While you're taking the video, you can take a still while it's videoing.
Okay, you know more about that than I do. I've never done. I know I use an app called Video to Photo, which lets me take a video and then go in and extract individual frames from that video and use them as individual images.
Right.
But I've not done it with the iPhone technology. I've done it with other apps.
Yeah, your 13 Pro Max, if you slide to the right, you're taking a video, and then while it's going, there's a white button. You touch it, it takes a still. I just wonder what size that still is.
Oh, well, where does it put the still? I don't know. Let's just see here.
Camera roll. Your camera roll.
So go to the camera roll, select the image. Well, here, and just to get the metadata on images with the new phones now, you just swipe up on the image, and there it gives you the metadata.
You think it's going to give you the accurate size of it? Okay.
Well, it should. I mean, I've been using. This is a great feature with the later phones. I used to use something called View EXIF, which is another metadata reader that looks at the metadata associated with each image. I mean, if the image has been taken as I do know what you're talking about. I just haven't done that in a while. But yeah, so just swipe up on the image that it puts in the camera roll, and it should give you all this metadata about it.
All right, that's good. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You mentioned the infrared filter. Is that like a moment lens or?
Well, the infrared stuff on the iPhone, it's really quite amazing. But there's a lot of bells and whistles to it. So there are several different ways you can do this. You can get a moment case, but then you have to get another company makes a filter mount that you can screw the infrared filter onto to attach it to the camera. That's one way. The other way that I prefer is to get a silicone case. This only works with the Pro Max of the 12 Pro Max and the 13 Pro Max. And you get a silicone case that, I don't know if you can see this, just looks like this. And the filter actually it's not made to work this way, but you take the filter and you kind of press and twist, and it catches on the lip around the lenses, and it holds. And I've been using it that way for 2 years, and it's quite remarkable, the images that we're getting with it. But if you don't have a 12 Pro Max or 13 Pro Max, then you would get a moment case, something called a filter mount insert, and a Moondog filter mount, and then you screw the IR filter onto that. I've got a video on it if you're interested in learning more, and then definitely go out to the Facebook group and talk to people there too. It's a place where people are posting and sharing information on how to do this. And then I've got lots of resources as well.
Can any of the IRs be done in black and white, or is it always IR color?
So infrared is a spectrum. The lower numbers are color infrared. The higher numbers are black and white. And because of the way the iPhone works, we're not replacing anything. We're not doing a conversion like we do with a big camera. So at the lower end of the spectrum, it doesn't work very well. It works best at the 720 nanometer or 830 nanometer black and white. And that's what I see done most. I've seen some people do some things, really interesting things with channel swapping and stuff like that in post, but that's not true infrared. So we're not doing color infrared with the iPhone. We're doing black and white infrared.
Because I tried to find an app that might convert to an infrared look, and there isn't such a thing for black and white.
Well, there are some apps that have what they call infrared filters, but they're really just high contrast black and white. I mean, true infrared is going to, green foliage is going to turn white, blue skies are going to turn black. That's the beauty of infrared for me. So yeah, there are some little filters out there, but they're not.
But no converting apps, no apps that just do a lookalike.
No, not really.
No.
There's a great black and white app called Procreate. Let me see if I can find it for you. It looks like, or Provoke rather. I'm sorry. It's I'm not hooked up anymore. It's called Provoke, Provoke. It's a black and white app. And it's not infrared, but it's very cool, and it does a really nice job of creating some black and white images that I really like. Now, again, it's not infrared, but it's a nice option.
Sort of like Silver Effects Pro.
Well, that's desktop software that's remarkable. That's the Nix software, which is really, really great. But no, this is a camera. Provoke is a camera that lets you photograph in black and white, and it's just a really fun iPhone camera.
Thank you.
What is the best holder to mount on your tripod? I know they have these squeeze holders that can be kind of lame, especially when you're out, at night at 1 o'clock in the morning on top of a mountain doing astrophotography.
Well,
what is the best tripod?
I can send you. What I'll do when I send the slides, I'm going to send a little handout that's got a bunch of accessories and things that I use. I use a $10 thing made by Manfrotto, and it is a spring type thing, but it fits most phones. And I've had in 10 years, I've bought two. I broke one because of my stupidity. I did a bad thing and broke it, but it's durable. You can pay $50 for these things, and I've had them break on me. So the one that I use is a simple one. It's cheap and it works great. And I'll include a link to it.
Okay.
In the handout I send you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, guys, it's getting close to my bedtime. I'm 3 hours ahead of you. So this has been really fun. I've really enjoyed the questions and the dialogue. And I hope I'll send you this stuff. I'll send it to Vicki and she can get it to you. And I hope you'll subscribe to my newsletter. I send out a lot of stuff about, once a month I do a newsletter and hopefully have tips and things. Let's stay in touch. And if you have questions about any of this, let me know. And then let's do a workshop out in San Francisco sometime. I'll come out and we'll have fun shooting and learning in the field and just have a blast. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really fun, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks and see what kinds of things you create. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.